Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy MKS here, back here with another video. Hope everyone's well wherever you are, and welcome to part 2 of my plans for unifying even Africa and Asia through Egypt, which I believe is the only transcontinental country, as I said in my last video, between Africa and Asia. I'm finally back because it took me quite a while to get back to making part 2. I did want to make all 4 parts yesterday, but I went to a games group, and then by the time I came back, it was a bit too late or whatnot. But anyway, I thought today I was supposed to go to the gym, tonight, but I got a bit lazy, and I thought I want to make the most use of my mum going out to the cinema. So I thought I wanted to make the best use of the house, having the house to myself. But my brother, actually, I didn't realize my brother was coming back from work early today, because sometimes he comes back at like midnight. So I thought I'd have the house to myself for a few hours longer. But anyway, having the energy to make this video also took a while. And on the YouTube version, I tried to have the cats in the thumbnail, but unfortunately a lot of times they'll distract me and go onto my lap and distract me when I'm trying to focus and like go on the keys and all that, as cute as they are. But as soon as I go to try and do a thumbnail, it's sod's law. I can't get them to stay still for the thumbnail. But anyway, it is what it is. That's why I had one on my shoulder, but he jumped off. That's why you can't see him in the thumbnail. I'm doing something like that, trying to hold him back. But anyway, on to the topic of the video. Sorry, I do give them my life stories, but I'll try and get back to going to the gym as well tomorrow, because I've been a bit demotivated recently. So I'm going to get back into that. So if you've got any advice or tips on how to stay motivated or things like that, how to have more energy, or any foods that can give more energy for long-term energy and stuff like that, and how to better use my time, I really appreciate those in the comments. But I think that covers everything for the intro. In fact, it probably went on a bit longer than planned, but here goes. So these are ideas, plans, thoughts, pointers, or whatever you call them, number 11 to 20, in which I hope Africa will network together with Asia even more than they already do, through Egypt, and hopefully towards a mutual benefit. So here goes. So number 11, I was thinking, like, oftentimes I talk about inventors, ideas people, investors, and that kind of thing. So this time I thought I'd try and do something different. I often talk about like 11 being a changing number as well. So like talking about what Africa and Asia could change, and what African and Asian nations generally could change. But this time I thought about a Zoom group. Now, recently I've been thinking about and trying to set up Zoom groups for neurodiverse people. And, well, that was in the past, actually, which I'm still hoping to do, especially in August and October and November. October more for dyslexics specifically. But recently I've been thinking about, like, part Asians, people who are part Asian, like myself, like, so people who are Eurasian especially, and also like Blasians, i.e. people who are part black and part Asian. But so yeah, how they can network. And I'm thinking of trying to make a lot of Zoom groups. So if anyone's interested in helping me to run them, but I thought people in Africa and Asia could make Zoom groups between each other to learn about each other. So if and when they're unable to travel, they could discuss together via Zoom, and that kind of thing. So they could also have like events on Facebook, YouTube, and other forms of social media, and that kind of thing. Maybe a website which can connect people. On that note, they could have like a website which connects people from Africa and Asia together, so that they can discuss things together and learn about each other's cultures and countries, and hobbies, and sort of become friends together. So maybe the African Union and an Asian alliance, which I hope to make, or even just general networks, which, like, where the Chinese network with Africa and Indians, and also others network with Africa. They could have this website which encourages their people to befriend each other and learn about each other and things like that. And again, they could use Facebook to actually communicate with each other, so they could bring people together through that Zoom group. So I think of like all sorts of different Zoom groups which could be made, so between Africans and Asians, and even between different Asian nations and different African nations themselves, within themselves, but especially for Africa and Asia in this case. Anyway, moving on, number 12, I'd love to see how they could help to market, promote, and ultimately sell products from African and Asian companies, and promote Asian and African businesses like Tata, Alibaba, Here's Holdings, I think it's called, and companies run by Dongoti and others across Africa as well as Asia. Gosh, there's some noisy cats. Sorry about them in the background. But they're very hyper. But yeah, so how to market, promote, and ultimately sell Asian and African products, services, and goods and things like that, and promote their businesses, raise their profile, and that sort of thing. And also, I know I talked about this part one, but I love to look into ways to support both African and Asian TikTokers and YouTubers and whatnot. Africans on social media, Africans and Asians on social media, and also making websites together and learning from each other and looking at ways they can promote cybersecurity and keep each other safe and mentor and teach and train each other and all that kind of thing. And looking at great role models and things like that from both continents as well, from both great continents. So mentors, role models, teachers, trainers, and that kind of thing. And again, helping to raise the profiles of Asian and African projects. Number 13, once again, I think it would be interesting to look at what some of the negative things about Africa and Asia. As I often mention, I know I like to stay positive as much. I like to think of like the positive things if and when I can, but I think it would be cool if they address some of the negative things, because obviously you can only solve problems if you first acknowledge them, I suppose. Again, I know that's something I mentioned quite a lot. And number 14, I hope they can solve problems together. Again, once they address such issues that they face, I'd love to see how they can have more better human rights, in better English, how they could teach each other languages, on that note, have better rights, human rights, freedoms. As I said before, I'd love to promote libertarianism, as said in part one, across Africa and Asia. And I think we call it, again, if Egypt hosted as many of these events as possible, like libertarian events and things like that, so they could discuss what freedoms and human rights they could have and how to have less rules and less laws. One thing they talk about in a lot of African countries, and I'm sure it's similar with Asian nations, is things like the LGBTQ issues and like rights. And to me, I think as long as you don't infringe on other people's freedoms and rights, I think you should be able to do whatever you want. Although I kind of think transgenderism is a controversial view. I should be careful what I say, but I do think it's like playing God. So I know a lot of religious people will be against it, but I have a bit of a dilemma in that as I say, I think you should be able to do whatever you like as long as it doesn't infringe on other people's rights. Number 15, I'd love to read from and hear about Asians' ambitions. Again, as I said in part one, they could be individual ambitions and also the different countries, like China's quest to get rid of poverty or to cut back on poverty, apparently. I think that's one of their goals as a nation, and India to grow into a 10 nation by 2030, I think it is, and that kind of thing. So I hope Asian nations can and African nations can grow as much as possible, and again learn from each other, network together, and hopefully by networking together they can exceed expectations. I'm a great believer if you work together you can achieve a lot more. Like teamwork makes the dream work, and as I often say, I'm not that religious, but I think it's a biblical teaching, which is many hands make light work. So I think they could build things together, try to tackle divisions across Asia and Africa and that kind of thing. So they could build things instead of destroying them and work together on goals rather than working against each other. And as ever, I'd love to know what you think about each point I raise. Number 16, I'd love for there to be committees and think tanks in Egypt. Once again, I'd love for Egypt to host as many events as possible and have like buildings that host as many events as possible between African and Asian nations, represented by each other's heads of states and things like that, and delegates and politicians generally, and councillors and whatever, and even businesses, and as many people as possible from those nations, from the African Union and Asian Alliance, which I hope to create, as I say, so they can put forward their representation of African and Asian nations respectively and look at what will benefit African and Asian nations. So I think one thing is if and when they trade together, which they do, of course, whenever they trade together, basically, I think that, as I say, it's a case of when, not if, but whenever they trade together, I think they should talk to each other about how they'll benefit each other. So China or India or whoever else invests with Africa or trades with Africa, I think they should tell the African nations like what they will do to benefit them in both the short and long term, respectively, and vice versa, I suppose, of course. But basically, as I say, I'd love for there to be committees, networks, think tanks, and other such things, events, basically, and that kind of thing, which look at how to benefit Asian and African nations, and hopefully most of them, if not all of them, will be hosted in Egypt, all being well, especially when it involves all of African nations, or as many of them as possible, and all of the possible Asian nations as well. Obviously, China could still do individual trade with different African nations in their nation, but I think it'd be cool if as many of those events as possible were hosted in Egypt. Number 17, I would love for Egypt to host look at a culture and tradition and what they can learn from each other. I myself am not always the biggest fan of culture and tradition, but I think it would be good if they learn from each other. Hopefully that will build a mutual respect, but they could be like where the African and Asian movie industries can network. They could have music, dance, and all sorts of things from Africa and Asia, so they learn from each other's dances and once again trade with each other, and just generally, as they learn about each other and support each other and that kind of thing. Number 18, I hope there'll be many positive success stories from Africa and Asia, and they'll look at, again, I know I said this in part 1, point number 8, but I'd love for them to look at what they love about each other. Number 19, I would love for Asian nations to help African nations in terms of like things like software development, so they can help more Africans to become software developers. Not that I want to see Africa as like always needing of help or anything like that, because I think that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I don't want to see it that way. But and I know there are already software developers in Africa, but I think it'd be cool if as part of the trade deals, in return for trade and access to materials and resources and the markets and that kind of thing in Africa, they should help to trade some of the Africans, or as many Africans as possible, in software development. And then hopefully they'll teach each other as well across Africa about software development. And number 20, also in STEM generally. And again, it'll be cool. I probably mentioned this point as well before, but it'd be cool if the elders taught the younger people what they know. And sometimes I think the elders can learn from the younger people, like in terms of technology and things like that. One of the things I'm not a big fan of when it comes to Asian and African culture is like having to respect your elders. Again, I know that's a point I've mentioned quite a few times in the past, but it's not something I'm a big fan of. So probably ending on a bit of a negative note, but I think there'll be some great opportunities for Africa and Asia, hopefully to have a mutual benefit, most importantly, and help each other to market, promote, and sell each other's goods and that kind of thing. I am out. Peace and love.